Hi, so good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Scaling Success, How AI and Data Transform Private Capital. We have two of the leading technologists and participants in private capital markets here today, Dimitri and Miguel. I will just ask them to introduce themselves and myself, and then we'll go into the webinar. So, Dimitri, if you could introduce yourself, thank you.
Thanks, Humphrey, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Dimitri Sedov, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Allview. For those of you who may not know us, Allview provides the software and data infrastructure, and we power much of the private capital ecosystem, from fund accounting to portfolio monitoring to credit analytics. My team focuses on building the data and analytics capabilities as well as AI that really help our clients run more transparent, scalable operations and more insight-driven decisions. Miguel, over to you.
Yep, and yeah, hi everyone. It's really good to be here. It's gonna be a really interesting conversation. And I'm Miguel Castaneda. I am a partner and I head the data and AI advisory practice within Alpha Alternatives. We are the specialist alternatives consulting division of a broader company called Alpha FMC Groups. And we create value for private market clients, and we offer advisory support, technology optimization, process transformation. We have about 1,000 globally. Within alts, we have about 200 around the globe, and we focus across the top 80 GPs in the market, and overall have about 300 clients. So, again, my practice is around data and AI, hence why we're here. So, really excited to be here.
Thank you, Miguel. So to introduce myself, my name is Humphrey Wood. I'm a product manager for our portfolio management solution at Allview Systems. So today you're going to hear about scaling smartly in private capital. So we're going to open with that topic, how to scale, from boutique to very large, complex private capital managers. We're then going to discuss data as a strategic asset, so how data has changed from just your own individual data you gather to being a core driver of investment performance reporting. We'll close off the session with AI in private capital, the hot topic, and some lessons about adoption, discipline, and how it actually works practically for private capital GPs and across the investment spectrum. So opening up with scaling smartly in private capital, I guess the first question is, why is it important and why is it critical? And I think Miguel could share his insights on why it's such a critical piece of infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think this is a great question to start with, because what we've seen is that the industry has crossed a complexity threshold. We have more products, more jurisdictions, and the LP demands have become an increase in volume. And of course, there's far more data than the operating models were originally designed for. So, if you just add people and spreadsheets, you can grow the AUM, but really what that causes is a growth in operational risk, in key person dependencies, and of course, the cost base. So when you ask, what is sustainable scaling, it's about the opposite. It's designing the process, the data, the technology, so that you can handle more volume and complexity per dollar of cost. It's about meeting the LP and regulatory expectations without those big heroic events every quarter. And ultimately, it's about creating an operating model that works within 3 to 5 years from now, and as you add new strategies, vehicles, and service providers. So, in other words, it's not growth at all costs. It's about how can you grow with control.
That's great. Thank you very much. And in your opinion, your experience, advising participants across the market, what are some oversights or maybe gaps that can happen when your clients are scaling operations?
Yeah, what I would say is that the biggest oversight is assuming that what has worked well between 5 and 10 billion AUM would scale linearly when you're at 50 billion. And really what we've seen is it doesn't. It's not a linear scaling. And I would categorize it, there's three recurring misses. I think the first one is there's no clear process owner or operating model. I think firms tend to scale headcount and systems, but not in accountability or governance. So everyone is helping, but no one really owns the specific outcomes. The second one that I would say is uh, firms tend to ignore the data foundations. So they scale reports, but they don't scale the underlying data requirements needed for those reports. And what you end up is with multiple versions of the truth. It's a lot of manual reconciliation, and it's a lot of friction between your core teams around investments, finance, and ops. And critically, I think the third one is there is an underestimated effort in change management. I think new tools get rolled out, but people still tend to run the old process on the side just in case. And you really never end up capturing the efficiency that you intended for or you modeled. So really scaling is less about buying more technology and it's more about being deliberate across people, data, technology, so that it can all evolve together.
Thank you. And that's certainly something we see, you know, with our interactions with clients, right? Is the challenge of maintaining data, you know, that you've gathered from disparate systems and making sure that the information you're giving out is accurate and clean. Dimitri, I think, you know, you've got great insight in this area, which is, you know, how can firms ensure data governance supports those operational goals, those outputs?
Yeah, thanks, Humphrey. And Miguel, really good points. You know, I always start with kind of a simple test. If your data governance makes life harder for, you know, your frontline, it will probably be ignored. So I think the real question for me is not really like, do we have a governance framework? It's more around, does it help us close the books on time, for example, right? Or respond to LPs faster, or I don't know, manage risk, you know, with fewer surprises. And so, you know, Miguel, you mentioned three things. I had three things in mind. At least one of them is similar to what you said. I think ownership and standards that you referred to is super important. And I also think, you know, defining them in plain language for the broader organization to comprehend, I think is quite important. You know, at Allview, we're quite explicit about this. One team owns the golden list, you know, another owns classifications, you know, with a clear approval flow for changes. You know, it's kind of basic, but it also prevents reinventing the wheel every time, like you said, every time you launch a new fund, for example. The other area I would say, you know, you kind of start from real processes if you can, not just abstract policy documents. You know, just take a few critical journeys, you know, month-end NAV or quarterly LP reporting, I don't know, covenant monitoring, borrowing base, you know, and then just ask a question, what data do we rely on? Where does it come from? Who owns it? And, you know, what tends to break? I think governance works when those answers are clear and live in systems, not just in someone's memory. And the only other thing I would add to that, to expand on the question, Humphrey, is really embedding governance into the tools that people use today, right? If it lives in a PDF, it will probably be outdated immediately. If data governance lives in validation rules, in dimensions of data, you know, in workflows inside your systems and the data platform, then it becomes durable. And that's exactly how we approach it actually in the next year's data platform. And that's what we do across the entire Allview stack. So, you know, I guess the short of it is governance that supports operations, you know, reduces rework. You know, if you can catch exceptions early, you know, give people confidence in their numbers, then, you know, then you achieve the desired outcome.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and it does like provide a step change in value to embed it into a client's systems rather than just catching it at the end of the process and having to rerun the whole process again. You know, and when you're doing that on a tight deadline, moving away from that to a consistent data management operation will free up, resources for value-added activities.
Yeah, and maybe I would add one thing also, and maybe echo what you said, Dimitri, is that I think governance gets a bad reputation when it's framed as like control for the sake of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the firms that really get it right tie governance directly to a business outcome. So whether it be like faster deal cycles, cleaner LP reporting, better insights. I think that's where we see a lot of governance. And as you said, right, like if governance visibly reduce rework or lowers the fire drills, I think governance is adopted. If it's just extra approval steps and more org complexity and red tape, I think people will just find ways to get around it. So I think
100%.
what you said, Dimitri, is right on point.
100%.
Thanks, and I think it would be good to get your view, Dimitri, as well on what firms overlook when they're scaling rapidly. We've had Miguel's view. It'd be good to get a take from you as well.
Yeah, and look, we talk about this quite a lot at AllView because we we see clients, GPs of pretty much every size, and I'm sure Miguel, you at Alpha do as well. I think the biggest oversight is when the firms really try to stretch their current operating model instead of really designing for the future one, and it's easier said than done, certainly. I would say that it's quite tempting for all of us to say, look, we'll just hire a few more people, right? Stand up another spreadsheet. We could clean this up later, but later almost never comes, as we all know, and that operational debt builds just like technical debt. So what we've seen from the AllView perspective with our clients is there are a few blind spots, and they kind of show up over and over again as we talk to our clients about this. One is, the lack of an end-to-end view. I think teams optimize their own slice, right? Investment, ops, finance, IR, but they don't necessarily ask the question, what does trade to report look like? At twice our scale. And I think the handoffs, the reconciliation, sort of the seams of the process, that's where usually things start to break. The second area that our client's been pointing out consistently is really underestimating how much variation you can tolerate as a business. Every new fund, every new side letter, every new fee structure, all of that adds complexity. And without some standardization, be that in terms or definitions or templates, you kind of hit a point where adding people does not fix that noise. And then the only other thing I would say in this context is probably instrumentation or tooling. Firms track AUM, right, but not operational metrics. Things like close times or manual adjustments, reconciliation breaks, maybe ticket volumes. And I think without those signals, you can't really tell when busy becomes unsustainable, right? We at AllView talk quite openly about these trade-offs with our clients and what needs to stay bespoke and where we feel like you have to enforce certain standards so the organization can scale without heroics, which I think is the word that Miguel used just now. So for me, Humphrey, the biggest thing firms overlook is really treating the operating model like it's a product, with a roadmap, right? And this is something that I would highly advise. An operating model is like a product with a roadmap.
Thank you. So, we've heard that private markets has reached a level of complexity that requires technology to solve for that complexity. And, that includes expansion in innovations, in investment strategies, the complexity of managing distributions across a much broader and expanded set of different types of limited partners in the industry. We've also heard about how data governance is critical to getting the best value and meeting that complexity. and that when clients are scaling operations, they don't scale linearly, right? You have to think about that governing model. You have to think about then also being able to manage your growth, like Dimitri said, like a roadmap, which I think is a great analogy and definitely makes sense from us as a software provider and data provider. One of the things that you touched upon in that is that the role of data is changing, and I think it'd be great to get a perspective on why is data now much more valuable, and how is data positioned as a strategic asset. And I think we can start with you on that, Miguel. Thank you.
Yeah, I think historically, data I think is moving away from primarily being just a reporting byproduct. And it's moving towards this theme of being a strategic asset in its own right. So historically, the questions were, can we get accurate financials and LP statements? Now the questions have shifted a bit more, and it's, can we anticipate portfolio risk earlier? Or can we give LPs deeper, maybe more frequent insights from quarterly, maybe even daily, but without necessarily multiplying the effort or the people or the headcount? And maybe like, can we arm deal teams with proprietary signals without just necessarily relying fully on public information? So I think that shift has pushed firms to think more of data as a product. And we're talking about thinking about it as a product. And what does that mean? It's a data that has owners, that has quality standards, it has different service levels, and it has a clear roadmap. I think the firms and the clients that we see that recognize and treat data as a product are the ones that are really pulling ahead.
Thank you. And that makes total sense, right? Like in public markets, there's already a fair amount of adoption of alternative data sets and data science and a recognition that data can be an edge, and that's coming into its own in private capital markets. Dimitri, you've had a big part in launching our data platform Nexius, which is kind of the hub and positioned as a data layer that can help our clients to centralize data across systems and provide them hard to find data on this market, which is notoriously opaque. What benefits can clients have or firms have if they are integrating a platform like Nexius?
Humphrey, I can talk about Nexius, day in and day out, around the clock. Thank you for the question. I do, before I jump into Nexius, want to say, Miguel, as I'm listening to you, I feel like, we're singing off the same hymn sheet, and that's wonderful, given that, we didn't really have much time to prepare, but kind of speaks to the partnership between all of you and Alpha, and of course, you are such a critical partner of ours in the ecosystem. So thank you for that, and I appreciate the kind of the brain melt here. Humphrey, to your question regarding Nexius, look, I think these benefits from any data platform, certainly Allview's data platform, kind of have at least two phases, right? There is week one, and then there is year one of implementing a platform like Nexius. In week one, I would say the biggest benefit is just simply visibility. Most firms have data scattered across systems and spreadsheets and documents, and when you unify it in a platform like Nexius, you suddenly get one view of your exposures, for example, across all of your funds. You get consistent sectors and borrower IDs. You get a clearer sense of what's missing, for example, or maybe what's inconsistent. So before even you start getting into analytics, being able to answer a simple question, what's our exposure to this borrower sector, without a manual hunt, I think that's a big upgrade. But over time, I think these benefits start to compound. And so I would say year one benefits, those would include things like reporting, right? It becomes faster, it becomes cleaner, because Now you configure it rather than rebuild it over and over again. Controls become stronger internally because you can centralize quality checks. You can have like the golden source and reference data. And you also get a real foundation for analytics. And I will say it, AI, right? We all get very, I think, both nervous and excited about what this next round of AI innovation brings, and we should be. One thing not to forget is AI is only as good as the data that it draws upon. So I think having that foundation, be that for benchmarking, for scenario analytics, and tools like Andy AI, which is Allview's conversational AI that we just launched, they get built on top of that platform. And that's exactly how we think about Nexius. You know, it's not another data store, but rather connective tissue between portfolio systems, fund systems, and analytics. I mean, Miguel, in your experience, what do clients notice first in data platforms like Nexius? Is it visibility? Is it control? Is it something else?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I think you opened it up with like the key thing, which in our mind it's like visibility, but visibility with less friction, right? I think that's a key distinction that we want to highlight. And so like platforms like Nexius, you know, what does it do? It allows you to centralize your data from your core systems for the accounting, CRM, the external fund admin feeds, ESG, et cetera, into a more consistent analytics ready model, as you mentioned, right? And I think that becomes the foundation for everything else. It's, you know, better dashboards today equals more advanced analytics. And as you mentioned, it's really the foundation for kind of the AI tomorrow that is impending. So I think everything you said, I definitely echo. And, to give back a little bit more to the audience is like, what does it mean in practical terms, like to have a centralized data platform? I think it's faster and more consistent LP and internal reporting, right? I think it's a lot of reduce manual reconciliations across systems. And ultimately, I think you hinted at it. It's the ability to answer new types of questions that are spliced by strategy, by sector, by vintage, region, without necessarily having to kind of kick off or stand up any new one-off data projects every time you have a new ad hoc question. So I think everything you said is on point, and I think why Nexius as a platform should be so central to kind of that operating model that we keep referring to as clients look maybe 5 years into the future.
That's a great point. And I think one really interesting thing, about uncovering the sort of opacity of this market is how can these platforms unify and benchmark market data? And why is that really valuable to market participants?
I can take this question, Humphrey. I think, before you can build a benchmark of any kind or analytic of any kind, you want to make sure that you have kind of the basics in place. And one of the most thorny issues in any data management is what I would call like common language, right? I don't know, as simple as different borrowers in your private credit portfolio appear under multiple names, right? Or sector labels like vary across systems. And so I think just standardizing the identifiers, taxonomies, what we in data space call the semantic layer, that I think is critical. It's not glorious, but it's the work that needs to be done before you can start iterating and deriving insights, right? And there are more and more tools out there to do it more efficiently, and obviously it really depends on whether your data store pulls from legacy applications, from files, from Excel spreadsheets. But I think it is critical, and you can't really avoid doing that. The second thing is really aligning internal data that you have within the organization to any external references. In private credit, for example, that includes administrator agent data, evaluated pricing, perhaps curves. There's benchmark data sets that show how comparable borrowers behave. And so, what we've done in Nexius, for example, with our private credit rights cleared, anonymized data set is that we link internal positions to Allview's private credit data corpus that you can see. So it's not, just your mark, but where the borrower sits relative to the peers, relative to the market. And that's the level of transparency that these benchmarks and cohort comps really bring to the game. And then, look, I think a benchmark only as good as its usefulness. And so at the deal level, for example, you can get very specific things like leverage percentiles or covenant cushions or sector performance. At the portfolio level, you may look at concentration versus peers, how conservative or aggressive your terms appear relative to your peers. All of that really comes from good external reference data. And we're very proud at Allview, having spent many years really collecting and stewarding this highly proprietary data for our clients. We also have secured quite a lot of data rights to some of this information, of course, anonymized. And so now we're able to bring that data back to our clients in the form of these benchmarks, which a lot of our clients find extremely useful in really providing them with much greater market transparency and insight than before.
Thank you, Dimitri. So, talking about the foundation of data and having both, very clean, consistent clients' own data plus market data and the value that can provide in deals to LPs and benchmarking one's own performance against one's peers. Miguel, how do you think, moving on to sort of like the hot topic of the moment, which is AI, how do you think AI fits into leveraging that kind of data set? Like, how does that work or add value from your perspective?
Yeah. And I think we're getting to the fun part of the conversation, right? AI. I think everyone's waiting for it. So we're 30 minutes in, we're in AI. But let's talk about like what AI is really. And AI is really just an amplifier. So, if your underlying data is fragmented and has like low quality, then it just helps you get the wrong answer faster. So when you have strong data foundation, AI can do really good things. It can automate routine tasks, things like data extraction, classifications, reconciliations. It can do things like surface anomalies, right? Like in specifically in like fund or portfolio performance. It can definitely flag those much sooner. And of course, the chat GPTs and all the other applications that are coming out, it can help people navigate information faster. It can chat with your data, right? Internal proprietary data. And that can really cut time, right? It's rather than clicking through reports, it's how can you start interacting with your data in a more natural way. So, I see AI as a next layer on top of good data and good governance, not necessarily as a shortcut around them. That being said, and I'm going to maybe contradict myself a little bit here, AI can be used tactically. And I'm not saying you have to wait for that 6, 12, 18-month roadmap on data before you start doing some AI-specific use cases. I think we found that as everything, you want to iterate very sequentially and very thoughtful. And AI can really give back to the business really quick wins with the clean and trusted data that you already have, and then allow you to perhaps have a longer lead time to build those longer data products, those longer data roadmaps. So although it's, long-term underlying data quality is going to be the success of AI, I think there is opportunity to use AI in the immediate very tactically as you develop the longer roadmap.
Absolutely, totally hear you. And we see that with our clients, right? And it's the kind of classic garbage in, garbage out of any kind of model or process, right? But the data curation and exposing like clean, consistent data sets for particular personas or end users with the AI tools is really, a good win. I think we agree there. I think, there's obviously always a tension with new technology. So you have something that's moving hyper fast, really on the forefront of technological innovation, like Gen AI models and LLMs. How do you, or how can firms kind of introduce AI whilst being aware of some of the kind of like risks of new technology, or ensuring that the governance and the use is aligned with their clients' like existing processes or security requirements?
Yeah, and that's a good question that our clients come to us with. And maybe I'll repeat myself a little bit, but I think AI really starts with the specific use cases and the guardrails around it. It's not about like what tool you use and how many tools you use. It's really about use cases and guardrails. So when we talk to clients, we usually recommend, start small with a well-defined set of use cases. Things like document classification, reconciliation support, portfolio commentary drafts, things that you can really measure impact today. And then put basic governance in place, things like which data can be used, who has access to those AI tools, and how can the outputs be reviewed before they reach external parties like LPs or regulators. And another kind of maybe recommendation that we give is embed AI into your existing processes rather than create separate AI workflows. I think the goal is always to augment people, not bolt on these parallel AI workflows. So, if you treat AI as any other powerful capability that you currently have, things like, you have to augment it with clear ownership, controls, metrics. I think you can move pretty quickly with AI without necessarily losing control or without necessarily having a business kind of KPI attached to it.
That's a great point, thanks. And if we take it down to one of those specific use cases or examples, right? I think one that like generates a lot of interest in the market and amongst software providers, understandably, because it's the secret sauce that each of our clients has, is deal source, right? And deal analysis. So Dimitri, how do you think AI could kind of really provide a step change in how deal analysis is done and the kind of outcomes that our clients have in that process?
I would probably build upon Miguel's points, right? Miguel, I think what you said is really resonating. It's we will see over the next few years probably substantial material enhancements in how we use AI and how integrated it is into the process. But these early days, I think the points you made around being fairly tactical around where you apply it, making sure it's part of the workflow, I think those are absolutely the right points in my mind as well. And so if we take this to the deal analysis use case that Humphrey just brought up, look, I don't think AI at this point is ready or ever will be ready to replace judgment, but I do think it will accelerate it, and I think it can make it more consistent. So, if we think of a typical deal today, deal teams need to read long memos, right? They parse agreements, they update models, then they draft, investment committee materials. A lot of that is absolutely essential, but it's also very repetitive. And so I think AI can certainly help in a tactical way, right? First, you could probably accelerate, that time to first view, if you will, right? Instead of days of orientation, I think AI can certainly summarize the data room, right? The very kind of plain vanilla use case, or maybe highlight key terms and answer baseline questions like, how can a borrower compare to similar names, or what changed between the different drafts? That's I'm giving the credit example. The second area I would say is just creating more standardized paths of ways to analyze, right? More standardized parts of the analysis. AI can absolutely draft summaries and scenario commentary based on structured data, based on past deals. And you kind of hope that if you do that, then analysts have more time to focus on the actual assumptions, on the judgment, on the investment thesis. So that's we're taking Andy AI at Allview and also our covenant monitoring tools, really connecting documents, portfolio data, and benchmarks more seamlessly using AI, so that we can accelerate or free up time for the analyst, quite frankly. And then thirdly, I would say, look, if AI handles every triage, deal teams can review more opportunities without burning out, right? And so they can be more selective because they looked at more deals. So fundamentally, widening that funnel, providing more bandwidth, is something that AI can start doing today. And whether you track that or if it's just implied, there's certainly the desired outcome is to have more time to spend on looking at more deals and perhaps having a greater selection. I think the guardrail is making sure AI output is reviewed, that you can override it if you disagree with it or if it hallucinated, and it has to be continuously improved. So shortcuts or biases, they don't slip in. But with that in place, with that kind of framework of controls in place, I think AI is ready to help in these ways today.
Great, thank you. And so, it's great to review that use case, and it sounds like there's a large amount of potential. I certainly see that working with the clients that we have, that they're using AI to build towards that kind of advanced deal analysis, to free up analyst time, to accelerate judgment. And I guess, Miguel, from your perspective, if we take from that one use case, what do you think the kind of potential development path for AI applications is in private capital?
Yeah. And
I think, Miguel, you went on mute.
Sorry, apologies. That's a good question, Humphrey. I think I would maybe categorize it into three broad stages. I think the first one is one that Dimitri you just kind of iterated on, is the efficiency stage, right? It's automating those repetitive tasks, doing things like data extraction from unstructured documentation, doing things like reconciliation across different source systems, and drafting standard commentary, for instance, on like IC memos, right? I think the efficiency stage is a lot of our clients are solidly in that phase and using either internal tools or off-the-shelf tooling around AI. So that's the first stage, efficiency stage. So what happens from here? So I think the second one is the insight stage, right? It's okay, now that you have those automated repetitive tasks, you can use AI to surface the patterns and scenarios, things like early warning indicators, maybe value creation opportunities, and maybe highlighting some risk, maybe clustering some of the risks that may not be super obvious when you do traditional reporting. So that insight stage, I think, maybe echoing what Dimitri had mentioned, it's not necessarily doing the work for you, but giving the right people the tooling to provide additional insights, right? And then what is the final stage? The final stage is the assistive decision, right? It's so, again, like I said, it's not in making the investment decision for you, but it's really acting like as a co-pilot. So proposing different structures, highlighting different trade-offs, and perhaps simulating different portfolio outcomes or scenarios. I think that's where AI will eventually take us through the more agentic framework starts to develop. I do still think we're still in early days, but the direction of travel is very clear. And those who are kind of adopting those foundations right now will be able to adopt those further phases more quickly.
Thank you. And then I guess the last question on this topic is what should firms prioritize for long-term AI adoption, right? So what are the steps they need to take? What are the different plans they need to put in place, and how can they kind of deliver on that roadmap, as you were saying earlier, Dimitri?
Look, I think the kind of the steps and priorities is exactly what we were just talking about over the last 40 minutes or so. let me try to sum them up. Nothing new here. Which both Miguel and I touched on all of those. I would say 4 areas. Jump out in my mind. One, Miguel, you just said that. Try it, right? Like I would call it like a culture of experimentation or discipline experimentation. I think is important. Let your teams try new use cases, but like with any investment, you have to measure impact. You have to document the limitations, and you have to shut it down if something doesn't work. So I don't think either waiting for the perfect solution or let everyone build everything is sustainable. Having disciplined experimentation as part of the culture, I think, is the first step to consider. The second thing we kept talking about today is really incorporating AI into real workflows, right? I think if AI only lives in pilots or some sort of a separate portal, it just won't scale. So it really needs to show up in the workflows that people already use. That could be portfolio monitoring, it could be fund accounting, it could be LP reporting. That's why at AllView we are building Andy right inside the AllView experience in what we call OneView. So I think that's important. We also talked about ownership and I would say kind of clear operating model for AI that applies for AI, that applies to data, that applies to any type of scaling. And that means that somebody within the organization has to own it, right? IT, data, maybe cross-functional teams that include both business and risk. I think that's important. And finally, I can't not mention something that is my bread and butter, and that is data, right? You have to have well-governed data for AI not to hallucinate, for AI to really understand the context, for AI to be able to connect the dots within the data sets and systems. So going back to what we talked about earlier today is really building out that data governance and the data layer, be that taxonomies, lineage, provenance, semantics, all of that is important. It doesn't happen overnight, but something that we can certainly help with at AllView and Alpha. I think between the two companies, that's what we do for our clients day in and day out.
Thank you. Well, so it was great to hear from you both about scaling smartly. Data as a strategic asset, and AI in private capital. Are there any final thoughts or closing takeaways before we move to a Q&A? So Miguel, it'd be great to get your take or your roundup of today.
Yeah, of course. And I think maybe I'd leave it with 3 simple ideas, takeaway. And the first one is what we started is really scale with intention. And again, growth is not about just adding products or AUM. It's really about building that operating model around it to support growth without constant firefighting. So that's the first one, scale with intention. I think the second one I would say is treat data as an asset, treat data as a product, really not as an afterthought. So I think the firms that invest data quality and governance are the ones who can then eventually benefit from things like AI and advanced analytics, right? And then I would say the third one is be pragmatic about AI. Start small, identify those really tactical kind of wins that you can get really quickly, and pick the measurable impacts and business outcomes. And of course, layer in the governance from day one. As Dimitri said, you don't need to be perfect, right? I think you just need to be deliberate and show some value and start moving the needle towards the adoption of data and AI. I think if any client that comes to us, right, and we see them doing those things, I think are better positioned, are in a stronger position for whatever new technology or new AI model comes next. So again, just to summarize it, it's scale with intention, treat data as a product or an asset, and then truly be tactical and pragmatic about AI and be open to iterating slowly over time.
I mean, look, you said it all. The only thing I would just add to that is I don't think anybody has it figured out perfectly. I think the pace of digital transformation is fast and it's accelerating, and we're all trying to keep up. I think where where we sit at Allview, and probably where you sit, Miguel, is we are starting to see best practices emerging. And these best practices sometimes come from implementers and software providers like ourselves, where we just keep doing something for hundreds of clients, and then eventually you kind of start figuring out exactly the best way to do it. Oftentimes it comes directly from our clients. At Allview, we have a strategic advisory board where we bring together our strategic, largest clients, at least on a quarterly basis, to really have a very direct and very candid conversation on where their mind is at, how our products can serve them better, and what we can actually do that we don't do today to keep up with their demands and needs. And it's just so interesting and so gratifying to hear clients share their best practices, be that around AI, be that around data, be that around scaling, and then bringing it back into the product teams and into the product roadmaps. So try, but I guess move at pace, and if something doesn't work, kill that and move on to a different experiment.
Great, thank you both. There's some great takeaways for the audience. We've got time now for a couple of Q&A questions. Do keep them rolling in the webinar. But let's start off with the first one. So it's a good one here on like a specific segment. So on fund administrators. So Miguel, can you share an example of how fund administrators have successfully balanced the compliance and reporting piece in the context of this discussion we've had today?
Yeah, of course. And maybe I'll touch it from the lens of the most interesting topic that we talked about, which is AI. So what has Alpha seen fund admins using around AI? And I'll answer it through that lens. And I think the quickest wins that we have seen them do are in the high volume repetitive workflows that they do today, right? So it's ingesting and classifying client documents, notices, statements. It's assisting clients with reconciliations, exception routing, and then it's really drafting and validating those standard communications and the sections in the reporting packs. So, we see fund admins invest in not just like the data, but also AI as rapidly as perhaps the GPs and LPs in our space. And it is a growing base for us as well within Alpha. I think the fund admins are realizing that they need to evolve as quickly as those that are servicing. And we see a lot that are developing, almost turning into or starting to look very similar to technology companies. So yeah, I think again, summarize it is, it's areas in which they can save time and reduce error for clients very clearly, and where of course AI can sit very firmly in the loop of and on top of data, with some augmented AI, augmented human kind of oversight and support. So that's how I would say it's where we see a lot of wins and investment in the fund admin space.
Thank you, Miguel. I've got another question here, which is more on starting out, right? So where to start and what foundational data improvements can I start with or prioritize to scale aggressively?
I can take this. Humphrey, I think the absolute first step is to really set up what I would call a data model or a taxonomy, however you want to describe that. I think having the rules of the road and having an internal framework for how the data gets harmonized across the different sources is the critical first step. Everything else will start falling into place. We live in the world where even in the last 2 years, the improvements in interoperability across the platforms, across different systems, and how the data gets ingested, be that through the integration APIs or various connectors, is getting better and better, no question about it. But if you did not have the Rosetta Stone of your definitions of your data model in-house, the different data sources will always be speaking different languages. And I think that, in my mind, would absolutely be a non-negotiable first step where you would start. There are different ways to go about it. You can do it in-house. You can rely on a third-party reference model, such as Allview's data model, because obviously we process data for hundreds of clients. You can go and hire a firm that just provides a golden sourcing technology. But however you do this, do that first.
Yeah, and maybe, Humphrey, what I would add is, I think that's key, right? Like that taxonomy, that unified data model is going to underpin everything way downstream, all the way to like reporting and creating data products on top of your data. What I would say is like, how do you go about building that taxonomy is almost as important as like that first step, which is, and I'll echo what I said before, is really choose the most critical use cases that will have the highest impact and will bring maybe the lowest effort, right? And prioritize that, look at it, look at all the data requirements needed for those use cases and build towards it. So once you have those really key use cases that you want to leverage the data platform or AI, you'll start slowly building that unified data model, that taxonomy, so that it's not building the entire enterprise data model day one. You definitely want to understand what data you have and how you categorize it, who the owners and stewards are, but it's starting tactically, iterate over time, show value in the first 6 months, then create a roadmap for 12, 18, 24. So I totally agree with Dimitri. Just choose it from a lens of like very tactical use cases, and then build as you go.
Absolutely. And taking the kind of wider market view, Miguel, what do you see the most from clients in some of those like high value use cases you could provide as examples for the audience here?
Yeah. I think it's, we see a lot in the front and middle office space, everything from, we get a lot of unstructured documents, and it's a lot of manual processing. How can we abstract that unstructured documents and then process it through a data platform so that we can create some insights and perhaps like enhance with additional data sets? So the first one is really like, for instance, like getting different types of formats of documents from portfolio companies. How do we collect that, funnel it, and then structure it in a way that it's actually usable? Another one is around client experience. Client experience has become a hot topic in the last couple of years, and it's how can you create kind of that 360 view for the clients, and that is not relying solely on people and man hours, blood and sweat, tears, to provide that client experience. So everything from like onboarding, how do you onboard a client, how you digitize that and create it and bring it into a central data platform, all the way through the life cycle of that specific client or LP. How do you bring them across? How do you create that unified kind of experience so that it's not manual back and forth via emails or even paper? So those are, I would say, like the two key areas that we see is around portfolio monitoring, data collection for portfolio level attributes, and then also around the client experience, which has been two hot topics that we've seen a lot.
Yeah, and that totally aligns to what we see from clients as well. And given the complexity, particularly on that client experience side, right, the amount of capital allocated to private markets has gone up. So therefore, like LP's workload has become a lot harder, and innovating on the client experience for institutional LPs and the wealth channel makes a big difference to being able to effectively market and provide the kind of transparency into the GP's offerings or portfolios that the LPs need. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. So Miguel and Dimitri, thank you so much for joining. It's been great talking to you, and thank you to the audience as well.